Hello, this is Miss K, and I have not read this aloud for a couple months now. A lot of you have been asking for the other chapters, so this is chapter 22 of Beyond the Bright Sea. It was odd to think that I, just me, one person, was a family, and that I really might have a brother. Do you know where Jason is now? I asked. Mrs. Pelham shook her head. Not any more, she said. The orphanage stopped taking in children when Jason was 5 years old. All the orphans were placed out with foster families, except him. Her lips trembled again a little. You know about Pennickis, then, and why he was sent there? I nodded. The poor boy. The doctors here told us to consider him contagious until they were sure he didn't have leprosy. So we kept the other children away and we wore gloves and masks for the first few months. And even after that, we kept our distance, though I found that hard to do. We would bathe him, of course, and dress him and do all the other things he needed us to do when he was very small, but he was alone too much. Such a sweet, quiet, big-eyed baby. She shook her head. After the first couple of years, when I was convinced he wasn't sick, they said I could hold him, but he wouldn't let me. He acted like it hurt to be touched. She began to cry, but didn't make any fuss about it. He didn't talk either, or sing, or play, or seem interested in much. Just looked out the window for hours, sometimes hummed a little. When he slept, I would sit by his bed and stroke his little arm or lay my hand on his forehead, just so some part of him would know that he wasn't alone. But what happened to him when all the other children left? Mrs. Pelham wiped her cheeks with her sleeves. We kept him here. What else could we do? I couldn't take him home with me. She looked away. My husband is a good man, but he wouldn't have it. We had children of our own. So we stayed in the orphanage? In that same room, yes. But he had the run of the place, too, as he got older. And that's when he began to talk. She rubbed her eyes with the heels of her hands. To the patients at first, I was shocked, I can tell you, to find him sitting on the foot of a bed one day talking to a little girl who had been hurt in a grease fire. She was burned on her legs, where the fire had climbed up her skirt before her mother put it out. And there was Jason asking her what was wrong. I remember it so well. I remember her saying, I got burnt in a fire, and him saying, does it hurt? She looked at me clearly, amazed after all this time. 5 years old before he said a word, and then talking like you and me. I couldn't get over it. It was as if he'd decided to just get on with it. Just start from there and make his own way. At 5. And he did, too. Never did learn to read or write, although we did try to teach him. Never did spend much time again in that room. He slept wherever there was a spare bed, went down to the kitchens when he was hungry, kept himself clean enough and dressed and busy helping out in the wards, fetching and carrying, showing people the way. And then, when he was just a little older, adventuring around the city on his own. Though I tried to keep him close, she laughed, which was like trying to keep a cat close. Quite impossible. I tried to picture it, a child half my age earning his keep, roaming the city, his home wherever he was at the moment, his life entirely in his own hands. I had thought of myself as a resourceful person, but not compared to him. Is he still around here? I asked, although I knew he was perhaps 20 by now, and surely long gone from St. Luke's. I do wish he were, she said, and he does show up from time to time, once with a valentine he'd made out of shells. She rubbed her eyes again. Until then, I didn't think he cared much for me, but who could blame him? Somebody who's supposed to look after orphans, too afraid to take care for him properly, or to take him in when he needed a home. But he seemed to understand, as he got older, that nothing is quite as simple as it seems. He brought you a sailor's valentine? I pictured the young man on sheer water. Did he go to sea? She nodded. How did you know? I stood up. When I came in on the ferry from Cuttyhunk, I saw a sailor with a schooner. The Shearwater. He looked just like me. Mrs. Pelham smiled. I doubt very much that that was Jason. She said, I haven't seen him for years, but you do look almost like he did when he was your age. We talked for a little while longer, and then I decided I ought to head for the ferry dock. When Jason comes back to see you again, will you tell him about me? I will, she said. A girl named Crow, if he comes back. From over by Cuttyhunk. From over by Cuttyhunk. I won't forget. How could I? She said. It's not often I get a second chance like this one. I walked back to the dock so deep in thought that I nearly fell through an open cellar hatch in the sidewalk. A man rolling a barrel from a truck yelled, "Hey there!" at the last second, and I pulled up short, sidestepped the gap, and went on my way. I knew there was a movie house in New Belford. Miss Maggie had told me about our motion pictures, and I'd always wanted to see one. I knew there were confectioners there too, who sold candies I'd always wanted to taste. But even if I'd had the money for such things, which I didn't, I would not have spent a moment on them. I could not imagine a movie more interesting than this day of mine, or a candy as sweet as the idea that Jason was real and might be my brother. I kept telling myself to add the might when I thought about that, until I knew for certain might was important. But Mrs. Pelham had said I looked like Jason had at my age. That was real. And so was the sailor I'd seen on the Shearwater. Whether he was Jason or not, he was a place to start. I would watch for the Shearwater to come through the graveyard, and I would be patient. Or at least I would try. As I made my way through the noisy, crowded, dirty streets, I remembered what Ash had said about New Bedford making me dissatisfied with our island, with our life there. But all I wanted right then was to go home. All right, that's it for chapter 23. I will see you guys next time.